my close advisor. The man, with all the secrets of the Republic of Turkey. President Erdoğan used these expressions for him when he was prime minister. 11 years later, when he entrusted him with the foreign ministry post, everyone was talking about this man of secrets. During his 13 years as Undersecretary of the National Intelligence Organization, MIT, Hakan Fidan was a civil servant on paper, but he had a say in Turkey's foreign policy. He was deciding whether Turkey would go to war in Syria with the foreign minister. He was also among those who decided which groups in Syria would be armed and how. Russia played a role in the negotiations on the war in Ukraine, and helped to normalize relations with countries like Egypt and Israel. He was another protagonist of the settlement process that Turkey is still debating. He was granted legal immunity. No one in Turkey could touch Hakan Fidan, let alone prosecute or even investigate him, unless the president gave permission. Hakan Fidan was born in 1968 in Ankara to a civil servant father. He was one of the 4 children of his family, with 2 sisters and 1 brother. He spent his childhood in Ankara. He was the eldest of 4 children. The older brother of 2 sisters and 1 brother. Maybe that's why he was a bit dignified. It is said that no one saw him playing games during his childhood. One of his biggest hobbies in his youth was cinema. He was a good spectator. In 1986, he studied electronics at the Warrant Officer Academy. In the early 90s, he went to Europe and served in NATO. He married early and had 2 sons. In 2001, he resigned from the Turkish Armed Forces at the rank of Warrant Officer. Afterwards, he started a very interesting academic career. His thesis at Bilkent University was titled The Place of Intelligence in Foreign Policy. After leaving the armed forces, Hakan Fidan began to concentrate entirely on intelligence. In 2006, his doctoral thesis at the same university was titled The Use of Information Technologies in Verifying Diplomatic Agreements in the Information Age. Between 2001 and 2003, he worked in various international assignments. He worked at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament in Geneva, in the United Kingdom, Germany and even in Australia. In 2003, he returned to Turkey. He was appointed as the president of the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, or TİKA. This is how his relationship with the AK party began. The Turkish public first heard the name Hakan Fidan in 2003, when he was the president of TİKA. His close circle describes him as a real workaholic, and a man of secrets. He is known to be very fond of his family relations, especially his mother and grandmother. Interestingly, many of the people who give information about Hakan Fidan do not want to talk about this in front of the cameras, yet they underline that he has not shown favoritism since his tenure at TİKA. They claim that he often uttered the phrase "many of our friends will be offended, but they will be sacrificed for the state." After the TİKA period, Hakan Fidan became the Deputy Undersecretary of the Prime Ministry. Here he advised then Prime Minister Erdoğan, especially on security issues. Both with the advice of then Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu and with Bashir Atalay's encouragement, Hakan Fidan was appointed as Deputy Undersecretary of the National Intelligence Organization, MIT. However, this was not easy, because the appointment of a warrant officer, who had left the army, to this position in the MIT drew the reaction of those in the upper echelons of the army. Until then, soldiers with the rank of lieutenant general had always been appointed to this position. What was interesting was that Hakan Fidan, despite not having an intelligence background, emphasized in his doctoral and master's theses how Turkish intelligence should be, as if he had calculated this. With Hakan Fidan's arrival at MIT, the struggle between the police intelligence and MIT resumed. Until then, MIT was an intelligence organization under the command of the military. Prime ministers like Demirel, Özal and even Çiller tried to dominate MIT, but none of them were able to pierce the armor of the military, and all of them remained in words. For years, police intelligence was strengthened, and seen as an alternative. In fact, after the Susurluk process, Police intelligence was even better equipped than the MIT in terms of technology. Now, on the orders of the Prime Minister, a brand new restructuring was underway within the MIT. Turkey first heard the voice of Hakan Fidan, who never takes notes, whose word forget does not exist in his vocabulary, and who is known to be successful in psychological analysis even though he has no training in psychology, through a secretly recorded audio tape that was leaked on the internet. Although the audio tape was leaked in 2011, this recording, apparently the fifth of the interviews, was made in 2009. According to the audio recording, Hakan Fidan, Undersecretary of the National Intelligence Organization, was allegedly meeting with both Öcalan and PKK representatives on the instructions of then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and in his capacity as a special representative. Undersecretary Hakan Fidan, Deputy Undersecretary Afet Güneş, Mustafa Karasu from the KCK, PKK members Sabrio K and Zubair Aydin were also alleged to have attended the meeting in Oslo, the capital of Norway, as the coordinating country. In 2010 Hakan Fidan officially became Undersecretary of MIT and restructured MIT. He even transferred important names from police intelligence to MIT. About a year after the Oslo audio recordings were leaked, a development on February 7, 2012, when Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdoğan was about to undergo an operation, marked the beginning of a major conflict that continues to this day. Senior public prosecutor Sari Kaya was calling MIT Undersecretary Hakan Fidan and 4 MIT members to testify as suspects within the scope of the KCK operation. If you try to pin the news published in the media organs of the separatist terrorist organization on my undersecretary, if you try to judge my undersecretary through this, it is not possible for us to accept this. What can we do in the fight against terrorism? Where can we take more useful steps in the fight against terrorism? These friends of ours are struggling for this. So this is not only under Mr. Fidan. I started this process with Mr. Emre for the first time. He also went back and forth, and now that this has happened here, this is something that has crossed the line. If I, as a Prime Minister, don't take care of an undersecretary who reports directly to me, because I am the one who gave him the instruction. If they're going to arrest someone, then let them arrest me. This was seen as Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization's first move against the AK party, and Erdoğan in the process leading to a coup. On February 7, Ankara and Istanbul were abuzz with activity. Fidan was called to testify at the end of his working hours. He called the Prime Minister and Erdoğan did not allow him to testify. After this development, which went down in history as the February 7 MIT conspiracy, it became clear that the real target was the Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdoğan.
After MIT Undersecretary Hakan Fidan was summoned to testify, a proposal to amend the MIT law submitted to the Parliament was passed by 266 votes against 63 rejections in the General Assembly and became law.
Amendments were quickly made to the law, and according to Article 26 of the MIT law, investigations against MIT officers are now subject to the Prime Minister's permission. While this was happening in Turkey, Hakan Fidan's name was being talked about in the world. Since the day he took office, the then Israeli Defense Minister, Ehud Barak had constantly targeted Hakan Fidan for criticism. He accused Fidan of being pro-Iranian. In the conspiracy set up by Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization members, all roads led here. It was among the allegations that Barack Obama called Hakan Fidan by name and used harsh words when they sat at the same table with Obama. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh described this meeting in his article dated April 4, 2014 as follows: Erdogan's goal was to show Obama that the red line had been crossed. That's why he brought Fidan. Erdogan wanted to include Fidan in the conversation. Fidan started to speak, but Obama interrupted Fidan by saying "we know." Erdogan tried to bring Fidan into the conversation for the second time, but Obama interrupted Fidan for the second time by saying "we know." At this point, Erdogan said angrily, "But your red lines have been crossed." According to Mike Donilon, Erdogan was wagging his finger at President Obama inside the White House. Then Obama pointed to Fidan and said, "We know what you are doing with the radicals in Syria." December 17th and 25th marked the beginning of a new era in Turkey. The struggle that had been going on for years between the MIT and the police was won. This time the civilian government was on the side of MIT. A major purge in police intelligence began. MIT became the main locomotive of the Fethullah Gulen terrorist organization investigation, the so-called parallel structure. After the start of the Syrian war, MIT was alleged to have organized dozens of cross-border and intra-border intelligence operations. In January 2014, the allegations that the weapons in the aid trucks stopped in Adana and traveling to Syria belonged to MIT would become the most shocking news on the agenda. This claim was also denied by MIT. It was also claimed that Hakan Fidan and his team stepped in after many people were kidnapped by ISIS due to the Syrian civil war. It was also claimed that Hakan Fidan and his team were involved at a high level in the negotiations and rescue of the 49 hostages kidnapped in Mosul. Hakan Fidan, who was close enough to Erdogan to be a witness at the wedding of Fidan's son behind closed doors, took the surprising step of entering politics. On February 7, 2015, he resigned from his position at MIT. Davutoglu, the prime minister at the time, welcomed the resignation. He was going to become a member of parliament. However, Erdogan disagreed. "I don't favor his candidacy." When asked about Fidan by journalists on his return from a trip to Saudi Arabia, the president replied, "We brought him to such a position, I am the one who brought him there, and if he was not allowed to leave, he should have stayed there and not left. Therefore, of course I am offended." Soon after, Hakan Fidan gave up his candidacy and returned to his post at MIT. This is how the second Fidan period started at the MIT. Undoubtedly the biggest crisis of the second period was the July 15 coup attempt. Fidan himself went to the general staff following the intelligence he received at noon that day, discussed the situation with Hulusi Akar, but still drew the arrows of the opposition for failing to detect early on that a group within the military would attempt a coup. Undoubtedly, the decision taken by Hakan Fidan and Hulusi Akar in that room that day was of great importance in uncovering the July 15 coup attempt. After the coup attempt was crushed, Fidan did not go to the Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry and never testified. Hakan Fidan's name started to be mentioned in many steps taken in foreign policy. In countries such as Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, where relations had reached a breaking point, normalization was always achieved through backdoor diplomacy and intelligence agencies. Negotiations were conducted through these institutions. Activities in Syria and Iraq were increased day by day. MIT now had a new doctrine. It turned into an organization that not only received intelligence, but also carried out operations abroad or captured terrorists and brought them back to Turkey alive. The intelligence chiefs of the United States and Russia met in Ankara. The meeting was hosted by the National Intelligence Organization. Intelligence came to the fore again in the war that broke out between Russia and Ukraine. Prisoner swaps and grain deals were all made under the leadership of Hakan Fidan, accompanied by MIT. American and Russian intelligence chiefs met at Kale, the headquarters of the National Intelligence Organization in Ankara. In this meeting, which we attended together with Mr. Hakan Fidan, the head of the National Intelligence Organization, there were the defense ministers and intelligence chiefs of Russia, Syria, and Iran. We exchanged views at this meeting. Perhaps the most talked about issue of the last period was the meeting with Syria. Hakan Fidan traveled to Russia with Hulusi Akar. For 11 years, Turkey had no contact with Syrian officials. Hakan Fidan was one of the main actors. Perhaps because of his recent foreign policy moves, he was appointed as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the new cabinet. Erdogan's close advisor Hakan Fidan, the most curious name in the cabinet, made his first public appearance in front of the cameras at the handover ceremony. I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for their trust and appreciation for my appointment to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after 13 years in the National Intelligence Organization, which requires heavy responsibility. He is now a foreign minister, not behind closed doors, behind a closed curtain like before. On the contrary, she is in front of the cameras. Fidan rolled up his sleeves and immediately got to work. One of the first things he did was to get on social media and open a Twitter account. Meanwhile, Richard Moore, the head of the British intelligence service MI6 and former British ambassador to Turkey, made a big blunder. He congratulated Hakan Fidan on his appointment as foreign minister with a message he shared on his Twitter account. "I wish my friend and former colleague success in his new post. Good luck, Minister." Moore tagged a fake account with the username at HAKANFIDAN_TR opened on behalf of Fidan. After Moore's tweet, many Twitter users, including Turkish citizens, warned him. Moore, who later realized his mistake, said, "Oops, this is embarrassing. So we have come to the end of another video and I would like to know what you think about it. Do you think Hakan Fidan's success in the National Intelligence Organization is important? Do you evaluate one country's secret service differently from others? Feel free to write your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss the videos we have published in the past and the videos we will publish in the future. Goodbye and see you in another video on another topic.